Step away from my son. No raised voice. No movement. Just 4 words dropped into the middle of a crowded restaurant like something heavy falling from a great height. And the entire room obeyed. Forks stopped. Conversations died. A child at the back table started to cry, and her mother hushed her without knowing why. Just feeling it, the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm makes itself visible. I was the only one who didn't step back. Maybe because I was the only one who hadn't fully understood yet what kind of man had just walked through the door. Or maybe because the boy's hand was still wrapped around my apron, and his grip was the kind that asks something of you without words. The kind that says please and don't, and I have nowhere else to go all at once. I looked at the man who had spoken. Tall. Korean. Somewhere in his 40s, though he carried it like a man who had decided age was irrelevant. Charcoal jacket. Dark shirt. No tie, no jewelry, nothing that needed to announce itself. Everything about him was already announced. In the set of his jaw. In the stillness of his hands. In the way 4 armed men had fanned out behind him without a single word being exchanged. His eyes were on me. Not on his son. On me. Like I was the variable he hadn't accounted for. I said step away, he repeated. Same temperature. Same quiet. Somehow worse the second time. She fed me. The voice came from beside my hip. Small. Steady in the way that things are steady when they have already decided to stop being afraid. Suhan was looking at his father. And his father, for just one fractured second, looked like a man who had been struck somewhere that didn't show. Every person in that restaurant was watching me. The cook had come halfway out of the kitchen. Deb, the other waitress, had pressed herself against the far wall. My manager, Carl, was doing the thing he always did when he didn't want to be responsible for anything. He had gone completely still, like stillness was a form of absence. Nobody was going to speak. So I did. He came in alone, I said. He was hungry. I fed him. The man's eyes did not leave my face. Who are you? His waitress, I said. Who are you? I heard Deb make a sound behind me. Carl closed his eyes. The man looked at me for 3 full seconds without blinking. Then something happened that nobody in the room expected, including me. He lowered his head. Just slightly. Just enough. You may have just saved his life, he said. The boy's grip tightened on my apron. Don't let him take me, he whispered. So quiet I almost missed it. But I didn't. And neither did the man. His jaw moved. Something flickered in his expression and was gone before I could name it. He looked at me again, and this time there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Not softness. Not exactly. A question. What is your name? He asked. Serena, I said. Bowman. He nodded once. Like he was storing it somewhere. Like my name had just become information. Ms. Bowman, he said. I need my son. I can see that, I said. And he needs a minute. The room went so silent I could hear the ice maker in the back. One of the suited men shifted his weight. The man in front of me raised one hand, a tiny motion, barely a gesture, and the shifting stopped. He looked at me for a long time. You don't know what you're involved in, he said. I know a scared child, I said. That's enough for right now. The boy was pressed against my side now. 9 years old, maybe. Small for it. Wearing clothes that were clean once but had been slept in for too many nights. The man's eyes dropped to his son. And for one unguarded second, 1 second where all the power and control and careful blankness fell away, he looked like a father. Just that. Just a father who was afraid. Then the mask came back. You have 10 minutes, he said. Not to the boy. To me. Then he turned, walked to the counter, and sat down on a stool with his back straight and his hands flat on the surface, and he waited. Like a man who had never waited for anything in his life, deciding to practice it now. I looked down at the boy. His eyes were still fixed on his father. Suhan, I said softly. I didn't know his name yet. I was guessing, filling silence. He turned. And in those eyes I saw something that knocked the air from my chest. Not just fear. Recognition. Like he had been waiting for someone to say his name the right way. Like he wasn't sure anyone would. I pulled a chair out and sat down to his level. "Tell me what you need," I said. He opened his mouth. Then the man at the counter said, quietly, without turning around, "Be careful, Ms. Bowman. Kindness has consequences in my world." The boy closed his mouth, and I realized two things at once. The first was that this man could hear everything. The second was that he wanted me to know that. If you've ever had to stand alone to protect your dignity, this channel is made for you. He had come in 43 minutes before the men in suits. I know the exact time because I just clock-watched my way through the 7 o'clock rush and was refilling the sugar caddies when the door opened. 7:17. The dinner crowd had thinned to 3 tables and a couple at the counter, and the restaurant had settled into that particular post-rush quiet, the kind that makes every small sound louder than it should be. He didn't make any sound at all. I almost missed him. He was standing just inside the door, close enough to it that he could have still been leaving. That specific positioning of someone who isn't sure they're allowed to stay. Small, dark-haired, wearing a gray hoodie that was too big for him and jeans that had been expensive once. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the plates on other people's tables. Not the way children look at food when they want dessert. The way people look at something they've started to believe they'll never have. I set down the sugar caddy. Deb looked up from her phone. "Hostess stands right there, hon," she said without moving. The boy didn't respond. I don't think he'd heard her as a direction. He was still looking at the plates. I walked over. I crouched down to his level the way I used to do with the younger kids at my church, back before church became something I couldn't make myself attend anymore. "Hey," I said. "You okay?" He shook his head. "Once. Small. When did you last eat?" He thought about it. Actually thought about it. The pause was too long for a child who'd had breakfast. Finally he said, "I don't remember." That was all I needed. I didn't call Carl. I didn't do the mental math on whether a kid's meal came out of my tips or the register. I took him to the corner booth, table 4, the one with the ripped vinyl that we only sat people at when we were slammed, and I went to the kitchen and told Marcus to make a bowl of whatever the soup was and a grilled cheese and a kid's drink. Marcus looked at me. "He got a ticket?" "I'll cover it," I said. He made the food. The boy ate the way I've only seen people eat in 2 situations. People just released from hospitals, and people who have been outside long enough to forget what inside feels like. Fast but careful. Like someone might correct a mistake. Like the food might realize it had gone to the wrong table. I sat across from him and didn't ask anything for the first few minutes. Just let him eat. When he slowed down, when his shoulders came down from around his ears, I said, "What's your name?" He looked up. Considered me. "It doesn't matter," he said. I kept my expression steady. Names always matter. Something moved across his face. Not agreement. More like he was filing the statement away for later, unconvinced but unwilling to argue. "Suhan," he said finally. "Serena," I said. He nodded, then went back to his soup. "How long have you been outside?" I asked. "A few days." "Alone?" He nodded. "Where were you sleeping?" He looked at the table. "Different places." I didn't push. I'd learned a long time ago that children will tell you what they can carry telling you. Push past that and they shut down completely. "Is there someone I can call?" I asked instead. His eyes came up fast. Sharper than a 9-year-old's eyes should move. "No," he said. Flat. "Certain." "Okay," I said. He watched me. Like he was waiting for me to argue. When I didn't, something in him eased slightly. "Are you in trouble?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I don't know. Maybe. I think so. Can you tell me what kind?" He looked at his hands around the bowl. Small hands. Clean nails. He'd been keeping himself as clean as he could manage, which told me something about who had raised him. "The kind," he said carefully, "that follows people." I sat with that for a moment. Then the door opened, and the kind of trouble that follows people walks straight through it. I felt Suhan go rigid before I'd even fully registered the men. His whole body, like something in him, recognized the sound of those footsteps beneath the noise of the room. Like his nervous system had been trained to notice exactly that. His hand found my apron under the table, gripped it, and Lim Jae-won walked in like he owned every room he'd ever entered, because in every room that mattered to him, he probably did. His eyes found his son in under 4 seconds. Then they found me. And in that moment, with Suhan's fingers locked around my apron and a man like that looking at me like I was something he needed to calculate, I understood, finally, what the boy had meant. The kind of trouble that follows people. It had followed him here. And now it was looking directly at me. Strong women recognize strong women. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Some stories are not just about what happens. They're about the strength it takes to stand your ground, to protect your dignity, and to demand respect, even when the world tries to take it from you. If you've ever had to make a choice that tested your courage, or refused to be bought, silenced, or pushed aside, then you're in the right place. This channel tells stories about women who cannot be broken, and the people who learn, sometimes too late, that integrity cannot be bought. Welcome to Afro Korean Tales and Stories. Lim Jae-won gave me 10 minutes. I used all of them. I didn't look at him while I used them. I kept my eyes on Suhan and I kept my voice low, and I tried to figure out in 10 minutes what had taken 4 days to break a child this carefully raised. You don't have to go right now, I told him quietly. But I need you to tell me something true. Are you safe with him? Suhan looked at his bowl. He won't hurt me, he said. That's not what I asked. The boy's jaw worked. It's complicated, he said. 9 years old, using the word complicated like he'd been carrying it for years. My father, he's not, he doesn't, he stopped. Started again. There are people around him. Not him. The people around him. And those people, they scare me, he said. Simply. Done. I nodded. Jae-won was still at the counter. Not looking at us, or appearing not to. But I'd already learned not to trust his appearances. How did you end up out there alone for 4 days? I asked. I heard something I wasn't supposed to, Suhan said. At my father's office. A name. And then one of the men looked at me and I knew, I could just tell, that me knowing that name was a problem. He paused. So I left before it became their problem too. I stared at him. You left to protect your father? He shrugged. Like it was obvious. Like a 9-year-old disappearing into Los Angeles for 4 days to protect a grown man from consequences was a perfectly logical equation. Something cracked open in my chest. I know that kind of love. The kind that makes you small so someone else stays safe. The kind nobody teaches you. It just grows in you when you love someone who lives in danger, and you start believing that your disappearance is the kindest thing you have to offer. I had loved like that once. Before I learned what it cost. Your 10 minutes, Jae-won said behind me. I turned around. He was standing now. 3 feet away. I hadn't heard him move. We need more time, I said. We don't. He just told me why he ran. I kept my voice level. Don't you want to know? Something shifted in his face. Barely. He can tell me in the car. He's been telling himself things in silence for 4 days, I said. Maybe he needs to say them somewhere that isn't the car. Jae-won looked at me. I looked back. The restaurant was still frozen. Carl had disappeared entirely. I'd hear about this tomorrow, I was sure. Deb was stoned, still near the coffee station. Marcus had retreated back into the kitchen, but I could see his shadow in the pass-through window. You're not afraid of me, Jae-won said. Not accusing. Almost curious. I'm afraid of plenty, I said. Just not of you specifically. Why not? Because you bowed, I said. Men who want to hurt people don't bow first. He was quiet. Then, unexpectedly, sit down, Suhan. The boy had started to rise. He sat back down. Jae-won pulled out the stool across from his son, the one I'd been sitting in, and he sat. Not comfortably. Not like a man settling in. Like a man making a deliberate choice to occupy space he wasn't used to occupying. He looked at his son. "Tell me," he said. And Suhan told him. I moved away to give them something like privacy, refilled a water glass nobody needed, checked on the couple at the counter who were pretending very hard to be interested in their pie. But I watched. I couldn't help it. What I saw surprised me. J1 didn't interrupt. Didn't correct. Didn't look around the room while his son talked the way powerful men often look around rooms. Measuring the audience, managing the image. He just listened. His hands were flat on the table. His eyes were on his son. And once, just once, his expression broke entirely open for about 2 seconds before he put it back. Grief. Pure and clean. A father understanding that his child had run away not from him but for him. When Suhan finished, J1 was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something in Korean. "Lo. Private." Suhan's eyes filled but didn't spill. He nodded. J1 stood. Straightened his jacket. Looked at me across the restaurant with an expression I couldn't fully decode. It lived somewhere between acknowledgement and warning. "Ms. Bowman," he said. "I owe you a debt." "You don't," I said. "In my world," he replied evenly, "I decide what I owe." He put his hand briefly on Suhan's shoulder, one firm, careful press, and turned toward the door. That's when his phone rang. He answered immediately. Listened for 4 seconds. And every degree of warmth, the fraction of it he'd allowed himself, left his face completely. He looked back at me. "Are you here tomorrow?" he asked. "I work every day," I said. He nodded once. Said something sharp into the phone. Hung up. "Don't speak about tonight," he said. "To anyone." Then he walked out with his men and his son and the particular silence that follows people who carry real power. And I stood in the middle of my restaurant with cold water running down my wrist from the pitcher I'd been squeezing for the last 10 minutes. Carl reappeared from the back. "Serena," he said carefully. "What was that?" I set the pitcher down. "I have no idea," I said. But standing there in the wreckage of the most surreal shift of my life, I knew one thing. Whatever that phone call had been, whatever had drained the warmth out of Lim J1 in 4 seconds flat, it had something to do with tonight. And possibly something to do with me. 3 months before Suhan walked through my door, his father was sitting at table 7. He came in on a Wednesday. I remember because Wednesdays were my worst shift. Half the regular staff called out, the kitchen ran slow, and the tips reflected both. I was already tired when he walked in at 6:45, alone, and sat at table 7 without waiting to be seated. I almost sent Deb over. She was closer. But she took one look at him and found something urgent to do at the coffee station. So I went. He ordered hot tea. No food. Paid cash. More than the tea cost. No acknowledgement of the difference. He came back the following Wednesday. Same table. Same order. Same silence. I learned not to make conversation. Not because he was rude. He never was. But because the silence around him wasn't empty. It was full of something I didn't have access to, and pushing into it felt like reaching through a wall you couldn't see. What I noticed instead, he watched the room. Not anxiously. Professionally. The way people watch rooms when their safety depends on knowing who's in them. His eyes moved across every new face. Every opening door. By the 3rd Wednesday I'd started thinking of him as Mr. Lim. I'd seen the name on his card when he paid. By the 4th, I'd stopped expecting him to be anything other than what he was. A man who needed an hour of somewhere quiet every week and had chosen my restaurant for it. I was fine with that. Then on the 5th Wednesday he looked up while I was setting down his tea. "How long have you worked here?" he asked. 4 years, I said. He looked around the restaurant slowly. "You're too sharp for this," he said. Not unkindly. Just observationally. Like he was reading data. "It's honest work," I said. He looked back at me. "Yes," he said. "That's exactly what I mean." I wasn't sure what to do with that, so I didn't do anything with it. I thanked him and moved on. But the next Wednesday he asked another question. And the Wednesday after that. Not personal questions. Not invasive. More like assessments. What did I think about the neighborhood changing? Whether I'd noticed the new restaurant 3 blocks over affecting foot traffic. Small, precise questions that had the feel of a larger curiosity behind them. I answered honestly. I always did. Then he stopped coming. 5 Wednesdays in a row. Table 7 sat empty. I told myself it meant nothing. People's lives change, routines shift. I told myself I wasn't looking for him. I was looking for him. On the 6th Wednesday, someone else sat at table 7. Younger. Sharper in the face. The same quality of stillness but worn differently. Less settled, more coiled. He sat down and looked at me the way Mr. Lim never had. Direct. Immediate. Like he'd already decided something about me before I arrived. "You're Serena Bowman," he said. "I am," I said. "And you are." "Someone who knows my brother speaks well of you," he said. "Which, for him, is extraordinary." I set down the menu I'd been about to hand him. "Your brother. Lim Jae-won," he said. "I'm the younger one. Lim Jae-soo." I looked at him carefully. The resemblance was there if you knew to look. The jawline, the particular economy of movement. "He's been coming here for weeks," I said. "He never mentioned family." "He doesn't mention most things," Jae-soo said. Something in his tone, not bitter, but worn. Like this was a fact he'd made peace with a long time ago. "That's actually why I'm here." He ordered tea. Same as his brother. I wondered if it was habit or inheritance. "He's going to come back," Jae-soo said. "When he does, and something will have happened by then, something I can't get into, I need you to understand that whatever he asks of you, it comes from a place of limited options. Not arrogance. My brother has more arrogance than most, but this time," he paused. "This time he's running out of moves." "I'm a waitress," I said carefully. "I don't know what you think I have to do with any of this." "Neither does he yet," Jae-soo said. "But he will." He drank his tea, left a 50 on a $4 order, and said at the door, without turning around, "You remind him of someone he lost. He hasn't figured out if that's a good thing yet." I stood at table 7 after he left and looked at the $50 bill for a long time. 3 months later his brother's son walked through my door, starving and alone. And I understood too late that I had already been woven into something I never agreed to enter. This channel is for women who have learned the hard way that dignity matters. If that sounds like you, I'd love to have you here. The next morning Jae-won was at the restaurant before I was. I came in at 6:50 for the 7 o'clock open and he was already there. Parked outside in a black car with no plates I was supposed to notice and a driver I was supposed to pretend wasn't watching my approach. I clocked all of it in the 10 steps between the sidewalk and the door. He was inside. Counter stool. No tea in front of him. He'd been waiting without ordering, which meant he'd been waiting for me specifically. Carl was behind the counter, doing the thing where he smiled too wide and moved too fast. The performance of a man trying to seem comfortable around someone who made him deeply uncomfortable. "Morning, Serena," Carl said. I tied my apron. "Mr. Lim," I said. "Early. I need to speak with you," Jae-won said. "I work until 3, I said. "I can give you 10 minutes now and more at 3. Something passed across his face. I think it was surprise. He'd probably never been offered 10 minutes before. 10 minutes, he said. I poured him tea without asking. Set it in front of him. Then I leaned against the counter across from him and I waited. He wrapped both hands around the cup. A gesture so ordinary, so human, that it slightly rearranged my understanding of him. "Someone knows Suhan was here last night," he said. The air changed in the room. "How?" I asked. "We're working on that." His jaw was tight. "What matters now is that the people who want to use him, they know he surfaced. They know he was in public. They may know the location." "This location," I said. "Possibly." I looked at Carl, who was suddenly very busy rearranging something near the register. "What does that mean for my staff?" I asked. Jae-won looked at me steadily. "It means I would like to move you." Move me. Temporarily. Somewhere safer while. No, I said. He stopped. I'm not leaving my job, I said. I'm not leaving my apartment. I'm not going somewhere you choose because of something I didn't cause. I fed a child. That's all I did. That's not all it is anymore, he said. Quiet. Careful. Then explain to me what it is, I said. He looked at me for a long moment. The kind of look that was measuring something. Not my fear level, I didn't think. Something else. The people who want leverage over me, he said slowly, are looking for points of access. People I've shown any regard for. People I've been seen near. You were in my restaurant for 2 minutes, I said. Long enough. I let that sit. So by helping your son, I said, I became a liability to you. No, he said. And there was something sharp in the correction. Immediate. Firm. You became a target. That's different. A liability is something I'd remove. A target is something I protect. The distinction hung in the air between us. I didn't know what to do with it. Where is Suhan now? I asked. Safe. I'd like more than that word. His eyes narrowed slightly. Not with irritation. More like recalibration. Like he was adjusting to a version of this conversation he hadn't anticipated. He's with my brother, he said. Jae-soo. I met Jae-soo, I said. That landed. Something moved across his face. Not anger, something more layered. When? 3 months ago. He sat at your table. Told me you'd come back. Told me to understand that whatever you asked came from limited options. I paused. He was right about the first part. Jae-won was very still. He didn't tell me that, he said. Maybe he didn't think he needed to, I said. A long silence. Ms. Bowman, he said finally. I'm not going to pretend this is a simple situation. I'm not going to insult you by minimizing it. People with real capability are looking at anyone connected to me right now. That includes you. Whether you choose to accept my assistance or not, that fact doesn't change. I looked at him straight. Then why ask? Because, he said, and something in his voice shifted by a single degree, not soft but honest. You have already done more for my son than people I pay to protect him. That earns you a choice. My world doesn't offer many of those. I poured myself a coffee I hadn't intended to pour. Drank half of it standing there. I'll think about it, I said. He nodded. Rose from the stool. Straightened his jacket. Think quickly, he said. I've received information this morning that suggests you have less time than either of us would like. He was at the door when I said, What was the phone call last night? Right before you left. He paused with his hand on the door. Someone had already called ahead, he said. Before we arrived. Someone told them the boy had been seen. Told who? He turned just enough to look at me over his shoulder. The people he was hiding from, he said. Then he walked out. And I stood there with my half-empty coffee and the slow, cold understanding that whoever had tipped off Jae-won's enemies last night had done it while Suhan was still sitting in my restaurant. Which meant they had eyes inside. Or they were inside. I ran the numbers in my head for the rest of that shift, and I didn't like what they added up to. Last night, Suhan arrives at 7:17. By 8 o'clock, before Jae-won even walked in, someone had already made a call. Which meant someone knew the boy was here before his father did. That left 3 possibilities. Someone had been following Suhan and watched him enter. Someone inside the restaurant had recognized him and made a call. Or someone had been watching this restaurant specifically, waiting for exactly this. None of those options were comfortable. The third one kept me company for most of the breakfast rush. By 10 o'clock I'd watched every person who came through the door differently than I had 24 hours ago. The man in the gray jacket who'd been nursing the same coffee for 40 minutes. The woman at the window table who kept glancing at her phone and then at the street. The delivery driver who'd come in for a bathroom key and taken longer than a bathroom required. Probably all of them were nothing. Probably. I refilled coffee. I smiled. I did my job. At 11:30, Carl called me to the back. He closed his office door, which he never did, and then he stood behind his desk with his hands in his pockets and the look of a man who had been composing a sentence for several hours. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I need you to be straight with me." "Okay," I said. "That man last night." "Yes. Do you know who he is?" I thought about how to answer that. "I know his name," I said. "I know he came in here for tea on Wednesdays for a while. I know the boy is his son." Carl rubbed the back of his neck. "Serena. Lim J1. You know that name." "I do now." He sat down heavily. "He's not just some businessman. Okay. He lowered his voice even though we were alone. "He's connected. Seriously connected. There are things. I've heard things about what his organization." "Carl," I said. "What are you trying to tell me?" He looked at me. "I got a call this morning. Before we opened. Someone asking whether a Korean man had been in here last night with armed men. Whether any staff had interacted with his son. Whether you specifically had spoken to the child." Everything in me went still. "Who called?" I asked. "They didn't say. The number." He slid a sticky note across the desk. "It came from this." I looked at the number. Didn't recognize it. "What did you tell them?" I asked. His eyes slid away from mine for half a second. That half second told me everything. "Carl." I didn't. I just confirmed that yes, a man had come in, and yes, a child. "You told them." My voice stayed flat. "You told them I was the one who interacted with Suhan." "I didn't know it was dangerous, Serena. They said they were with the police, that they were looking for a missing." "They weren't police," I said. The color left his face. "How do you know that?" "Because J1 told me this morning that someone had called his enemies before he even arrived last night. And now you're telling me someone called here at opening claiming to be police, asking specifically about me." I looked at him steadily. "Carl, you gave them my name." He stood up. "Serena, I'm sorry, if I'd known." "I need the rest of the day," I said. "What?" "I'm taking the rest of my shift as personal time." "I'll cover it." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," I said. Because standing in that small office with the realization settling over me like cold water, I knew two things clearly. The first was that Carl, foolish and spineless as he was, had probably not done it maliciously. He'd been manipulated by people who were very good at manipulation. The second was that I needed to call the number on the card J1 had left me before anyone else made any more decisions about my safety on my behalf. I picked up my bag. My jacket. "Serena," Carl started. "Lock the back entrance," I said. "And don't confirm anything else to anyone who calls. Not my hours. Not my address. Nothing." I walked out through the kitchen. Marcus stopped me at the back door. "You okay?" "Not yet," I said honestly. He held the door. "You need anything?" I thought about it. "Pray if you do that," I said. Then I stepped out into the alley behind the restaurant, and I pulled out my phone and I dialed the number on the card. It rang once. "Ms. Bowman," J1 said. Like he'd been expecting the call. Like he'd known I'd need to make it before noon. "Someone called my manager this morning," I said, claiming to be police. He confirmed my involvement. My name. A pause. Brief and precise. "Where are you now?" "Behind the restaurant." "Stay there. Do not go home." "Why?" "Because if they called your manager at opening," he said, "they've had your address since last night." The alley felt very open all of a sudden. I pressed my back against the wall. "J1," I said. First time I'd used his name. Neither of us acknowledged it. "Yes." "Is Suhan actually safe?" A pause that was one beat too long. "I need you to stay where you are," he said. And that pause, that one beat, told me that the answer to my question was more complicated than yes. "They have Jesu." 3 words. That's all he said when I picked up the phone. But the way he said them, the specific flatness of a man crushing something very large into very few syllables, told me everything about what those 3 words actually weighed. I pressed my back harder against the alley wall. Your brother. Yes. When? Within the last hour. While I was with you this morning. A pause so brief it was almost not a pause at all. They moved faster than I anticipated. That last sentence cost him something. I could hear it. A man like Lim Jae-won did not say I miscalculated in any language, but that's what it was. Stripped down. Honest in the way that only real emergency produces honesty. Is Suhan still with him? I asked. No. Suhan was moved before. He stopped. Suhan is not with Jae-soo. Then where? I need you to listen to me carefully, he said. And I need you to do exactly what I tell you without asking me to justify every step. That depends on what you tell me, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. You're going to make this difficult, he said. I'm going to make it honest, I said. There's a difference. Something that was almost, not quite, but almost, an exhale on his end. There is a car at the end of your alley. Gray. My man is driving. Get in. I looked toward the end of the alley. Gray car. Engine running. I hadn't noticed it when I came out, which meant it had arrived recently, or I had been too shaken to clock it. Neither option was comfortable. If I get in that car, I said, where does it take me? Somewhere your address isn't already known. And Suhan. We'll meet you there. I stood in that alley for 5 seconds that felt much longer. I thought about Carl sitting behind his desk having given my name to strangers. I thought about the man in the gray jacket who'd been nursing coffee for 40 minutes. I thought about Jae-soo, who had sat at table 3 months ago and warned me with the particular sadness of someone who already knew how this would go. I thought about a 9-year-old boy who had spent 4 days disappearing to protect people he loved. I picked up my bag. If anything happens to me, I said, I need you to understand that I have a sister in Atlanta who will not let it go quietly. Nothing will happen to you, he said. That's not a promise you can make, I said. No, he agreed. But I'm making it anyway. I walked to the end of the alley and got in the car. The driver didn't speak. Didn't look at me in the mirror more than once. He drove with the particular focus of someone navigating a route they'd memorized, not following GPS, turns that felt deliberate, a doubled-back block that I recognized as checking for a tail. 22 minutes later we pulled into the underground garage of a building in Koreatown that had no signage and a keypad entry, and the specific anonymity of somewhere that had been chosen precisely because it looked like nothing. The elevator opened into a floor that was half office, half residence. Clean lines, minimal furniture, the kind of space that was functional rather than lived in. 2 men I didn't recognize stood near the window. They looked at me the way security looks at variables. Suhan was sitting at a kitchen counter eating ramen. He looked up when I walked in, and the expression on his face, relief, immediately suppressed, immediately replaced by the careful neutrality of a child who had learned not to show too much, cracked something open in me that I had to breathe through quietly. You came, he said. I came, I said. I sat on the stool beside him. He pushed the ramen toward me slightly, an offering wordless, the way children share when they want to say something they don't have language for yet. I took a bite. He watched me. Is it okay? He asked. It's good, I said. And it was. Spicy and real and grounding in a way I badly needed. We sat like that for a few minutes. The 2 men near the window pretended not to watch us. The city hummed somewhere below. My uncle, Suhan said finally. Quietly. He's going to be okay. Right. I looked at him. I didn't know the answer. And I had decided a long time ago, in a hospital room, 2 years before this moment, when a doctor had used the word complications to mean something that could not be uncomplicated, that I would not lie to children about hard things. Your father is working on it, I said. He's very good at solving hard problems. Suhan nodded slowly. He is, he said. But Uncle Jae-soo is the one who knows when my father is wrong. He paused. They need each other. My father just doesn't say that. 9 years old. I had to look away for a moment. The door at the far end of the space opened and Jae-won walked in. He'd changed. Same composure, different jacket, and he moved through the room with the tight efficiency of a man running parallel tracks in his mind simultaneously. He spoke briefly to the two men near the window in Korean, low and rapid. One of them nodded and left. Then he walked to the counter. He looked at his son for a moment. Something passed over his face. "Eat," he said to Suhan. Simply, like the word was carrying more than it appeared to. Suhan ate. Jae-won looked at me. "We need to talk." "I assumed," I said. We moved to the far end of the room. He stood with his back to the window, city light framing him, arms loosely at his sides. The posture of a man in control of a situation that was not yet fully in control. "Jae-soo is being held as leverage," he said. "They want me to withdraw from a business arrangement I've spent 3 years building. It would cost me considerably, and it would signal to everyone in my world that I can be moved by personal threat. Which is why you can't just comply," I said. "Compliance would make Suhan a target permanently," he said. "If they know I bend for family, they will use family every time." I looked at him. "So what are you going to do?" "I'm going to remove the leverage," he said. "Extract Jae-soo. And then I'm going to make clear, permanently, that this avenue is closed." "How long will that take?" "Hours. Possibly longer. And while it's happening, you stay here. With Suhan." He met my eyes directly. "I'm asking, not instructing." The distinction again. He kept making it. I kept noticing. "Okay," I said. He nodded once. "Turn to go." Jae-won. He stopped. "What did your brother tell you?" I asked. "When you found out he'd come to see me, what did he say?" A long pause. "He said you were the first person in 4 years who spoke to me like I was a person and not a position," he said. "And that I should be careful not to waste that." He walked out before I could respond. The door closed. Suhan looked over at me from the counter. "He doesn't say things like that to most people," he said. "I know," I said. "That means something," Suhan said. "Very serious. Very nine." "Eat your ramen," I said. But I stood at that window for a long time after, watching the city, turning his words over, and trying not to think about the fact that somewhere out in that city, people who had already found my workplace and knew my address were being handled by a man I had known for less than 24 hours. And that I trusted him anyway. Not blindly. Not without reservation. But enough. The question that kept coming back was simpler and harder than any of the others. Was that wisdom? Or was that something I couldn't afford? If you're a woman who believes respect is worth more than money, go ahead and subscribe. These are the stories we tell here. The call came at 2:14 in the morning. I know because I was awake. Had been for hours. Suhan had fallen asleep on the couch with the television on low, a nature documentary, elephants, something gentle, and I had sat in the chair across from him and watched him sleep the way I used to imagine watching someone else sleep. Someone smaller. Someone I never got to keep. I had given myself 60 seconds of that feeling. Then I had put it away. The phone Jae-won's man had given me buzzed on the table. Unknown number. Not Jae-won's. I picked up. Ms. Bowman. A woman's voice. Korean accent. Slight. Precise English. The kind of precision that comes from learning a language as an adult and deciding to master it completely. "Yes," I said carefully. "My name is not important," she said. "What is important is that you understand your situation more fully than Jae-won has chosen to explain it." Every hair on my arms. "I'm listening," I said. I stood and moved toward the hallway, away from Suhan. "The boy is not simply a witness," the woman said. "What he heard, the name he heard, belongs to someone with reach that extends well beyond Lim Jae-won's organization. The people holding Jae-soo are not independent actors. They are representatives." "Representatives of who?" "Someone who has been looking for a reason to remove Jae-won for 2 years," she said. "Jae-soo is not leverage for a business arrangement. He is bait. The extraction Jae-won is planning, they want him to attempt it. They are waiting for him to move." The room felt smaller. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you are in that building, she said, and you don't know what you're sitting in the middle of. And because J1 is many things, but he is not someone who chooses to put civilians in danger intentionally. He doesn't know the full picture. If he walks into that extraction. She stopped. Who are you? I asked. A pause. Someone who has known J1 a long time, she said. And who has reasons of her own for wanting him to survive this. That's not an answer. No, she agreed. But it's what I can give you. Call him. Tell him to stop. Tell him to verify before he moves. He will not want to hear it from me. He might hear it from you. Why would he hear it from me? I said. He's known me for 1 day. Yes, she said simply. And he brought you into a safe house and left his son in your care. Think about what that means for a man like him. The line went dead. I stood in the hallway for a long moment. Then I called J1. It rang 4 times. He picked up on the 5th, which told me he was mid-operation, picking up only because it was my number, not his team. Not a good time, he said. Background noise. Movement. Stop, I said. Don't go in. Silence. Then. What? I just got a call. A woman. Korean. She said it's a trap. That Jae-soo is bait. That they want you to attempt the extraction. A pause that was sharp and specific. The pause of a man recalculating at speed. What number did she call from? Unknown. What exactly did she say? I told him. All of it. Word for word, because that's how I process things. I store them accurately when I know they matter. When I finished, the background noise on his end had gone quiet. He'd stepped away from his team. The name she used, he said carefully. She said someone with reach beyond my organization. Yes. Did she give a name? No. Another pause. Longer. J1, I said. Who is she? The silence before he answered had a texture to it. Heavy. Old. Someone I used to trust, he said. Used to. It's complicated, he said. And the way he said it, flat, closed, told me that it was the kind of complicated that had a person's face attached to it. Is she right? I asked. About the trap? Another pause. It's possible, he said. The timing of how quickly they moved, I had questions about it. I set them aside because Jae-soo was the priority. Don't set them aside, I said. A long silence. You called me at 2 a.m., he said, to protect me. I called you at 2 a.m., I said, because your son is asleep 10 feet away and I made an implicit promise when I got in that car. Those aren't mutually exclusive, he said quietly. I didn't answer that. Pull back, I said. Verify. Then move. Pulling back has a cost, he said. In my world, hesitation reads as weakness. In my world, I said, walking into a trap reads as gone. The longest pause yet. Stay with him, he said finally. I'm not going anywhere, I said. He hung up. I walked back to the main room. Suhan hadn't moved. The elephants on the television had been replaced by something about oceans. Blue light across his face, peaceful in the specific way of children who have finally decided they're somewhere safe. I sat back in the chair, and I thought about the woman on the phone. The precision of her. The way she'd chosen her words like someone who had once been in rooms where words had consequences. Someone who has known J1 a long time. Reasons of her own for wanting him to survive. There was a whole story in those 2 sentences. A whole history I wasn't part of and hadn't been told. And I sat with the uncomfortable knowledge that I had just become, without agreeing to it, without fully understanding it. A piece on a board much larger and older than one hungry boy and one act of kindness in a small Los Angeles restaurant. The question was no longer whether I was involved. The question was how deep it went. And whether the woman who had just called me was the most dangerous person in this story. Or whether she was the only honest one. He came back at dawn. No warning. No call ahead. The door code entered with the specific efficiency of exhaustion. Numbers punched correctly the first time but without any deliberateness. And then he was in the room, jacket gone, the sleeves of his dark shirt pushed to the elbows, a cut along his left forearm wrapped in what appeared to be gauze applied by someone who knew what they were doing but had done it quickly. I was already awake. Suhan was still asleep. Jae-won looked at his son first. Just for a moment. The particular assessment of a parent checking. Breathing, present, fine. Then his eyes came to me. Jae-soo? I asked. Safe, he said. Home. I exhaled slowly. He moved to the kitchen, filled a glass of water and drank it standing at the counter, looking at nothing specific. The posture of a man allowing himself 30 seconds of being entirely still before the next thing started. I gave him the 30 seconds. Then, the trap. Real, he said. They had 4 men positioned for my approach. We came from a different angle. He set the glass down. Your call saved time. Possibly more than time. The woman, I said. Did you figure out how she knew? He was quiet for a moment. She has a source inside my organization, he said. I have a guess as to who. I'm not ready to act on a guess. Whoever called her, they knew you'd brought me in, I said. Yes. Which means they know I'm here. Yes. He turned to look at me directly. I'm going to move you again. This morning. I'm sorry. I know that's. Stop apologizing for logistics, I said. It wastes time. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth exactly. More like recognition. The specific look of someone who has spent a long time surrounded by people who perform emotions at them and has just encountered something different. I need to ask you something, he said. Okay. Last night, the woman who called you. She said I hadn't explained your situation fully. He was careful with each word. She was right. I brought you into this without giving you complete information because complete information would have made you less likely to come. That was deliberate. And it was wrong. The room was very quiet. I had not expected that. Not the admission. Not the directness of it. I had expected management. The smooth, practiced version of accountability that powerful people perform when they need your continued cooperation. This was not that. Tell me now, I said. He told me. The full shape of it was larger than I'd understood. The name Suhan had overheard didn't belong to a rival. It belonged to a man named Shin who operated across 3 cities and had spent 2 years building a case. Not a legal case, but the kind of case built in the shadows, to take over Jae-won's entire network. Jae-won had been aware of the threat, but had underestimated the timeline. Suhan hearing that name had accelerated everything because it confirmed to Shin that Jae-won's domestic life was porous. Accessible. They don't just want leverage, Jae-won said. They want me visible. Reactive. They want me making moves that expose my structure. The extraction last night, I said, would have done exactly that, he said. If you hadn't called. I sat with the full weight of that. What happens now? I asked. I stop being reactive, he said. I make a move they aren't expecting. What move? He looked at me for a long moment. I go to Shin directly, he said. Not with force. With information. Something he doesn't know I have. Something that rebalances the entire equation. Is that safe? No, he said plainly. But it ends this faster than anything else. And fast matters now. Because as long as this is unresolved. He stopped. Suhan isn't safe, I finished. And neither are you, he said. I looked at him. He didn't look away. There was something in that prolonged eye contact that neither of us named and both of us felt. The specific discomfort of 2 people who have been through enough together in a short time that a line has been crossed without anyone choosing to cross it. When do you go? I asked. This afternoon, he said. After I move you and Suhan. Where are you moving us? My mother's house, he said. I stared at him. Your mother. In Pasadena, he said. She doesn't know my business. She has never wanted to. She knows Suhan. She will ask you 20 questions and feed you until you physically cannot eat more, and she will absolutely comment on your hair. I blinked. My hair. She comments on everyone's hair, he said. Flat. Matter of fact. It means she likes you. I'm telling you in advance so you're not caught off guard. I looked at this man, this controlled, dangerous, careful man who had just warned me about his mother's hair opinions, and I felt something completely inappropriate rise in my chest. It wasn't quite a laugh. It didn't make it out. But it was close. Okay, I said. Okay, he said. Suhan stirred on the couch, opened one eye, looked at his father. You're back, he said. Sleepy. Simple. I'm back, Jae-won said. Suhan closed his eye again. Okay, he murmured, and was asleep within seconds, the absolute boneless trust of a child who had decided the person he needed most was in the room. Jae-won stood very still for a moment. Then he sat down in the chair across from his son. And for the first time since I'd met him, he looked like a man who wasn't calculating anything at all. Just a father. In a room with his child. Breathing. I went to make coffee because it felt like the right thing to do. And because some moments deserve the privacy of not being watched. His mother opened the door before we knocked. She was smaller than I expected. Trim, precise posture, silver-streaked hair pulled back in a way that suggested discipline rather than style. She wore a pale yellow cardigan and the expression of a woman who had been given approximately 30 minutes' notice and had used every second of it. Her eyes went to Suhan first. She said his name in Korean and he went to her immediately, not with a child's usual performance of affection, but with the genuine collapse of a boy who had been holding himself together for days and had just reached a person he knew wouldn't require him to keep doing it. She held him. Both arms. Eyes closed. Then she straightened. Looked at Jae-won with an expression that had several layers running simultaneously. Relief, concern, and a very specific maternal accounting that I suspected he had been receiving his entire life. She said something in Korean. Brief. Sharp at the edges. Jae-won answered in Korean. Shorter. She made a sound that needed no translation. Then she looked at me. I had been standing slightly behind Jae-won, not hiding, just giving the family moment its space. Now her full attention arrived, and it was the kind of attention that is actually an assessment. She looked at my face, my hands, my shoes, a quick drop of the eyes, a quicker return. Then she said in English that was careful and complete, "You fed my grandson." "Yes," I said. She nodded once. "Come in." That was it. No more audition. Just, come in. The house was warm and ordered in a way that felt earned rather than decorated. Framed photographs. A cabinet with small objects arranged precisely. The smell of something already cooking, which meant she had started before we arrived, which meant she had decided before she saw me. Jae-won didn't come inside. He stood at the doorway and spoke to his mother quietly in Korean for about 2 minutes. She listened without interrupting, which told me this was a different register of conversation. Not the maternal accounting of a moment ago, but something older and more serious between them. She answered him. 2 sentences. He bowed his head slightly, not the public bow I'd witnessed at the restaurant, but a smaller, more real one. The bow of a son. Then he looked at me over his mother's shoulder. "I'll be back tonight," he said. "Be careful," I said. Something moved across his face. "You said that like you mean it." "I say things like I mean them," I said. "Generally." He held my eyes for a moment longer than necessary. Then he left. His mother watched him go from the doorway until the car disappeared. Then she closed the door and turned to me with the full practicality of a woman who had spent decades sending people she loved into uncertain situations and had built a life that functioned beautifully in the meantime. "Are you hungry?" she asked. "I could eat," I said. "Good," she said. "Sit." I sat. Suhan reappeared from somewhere deeper in the house, changed into clean clothes that had been kept here for him, which told me this house was a place he knew well, returned to regularly, a constant in a life with many variables. He sat beside me at the kitchen table and watched his grandmother with the specific contentment of a child in their safest place. She cooked and she talked. Not about Jae-won. Not about what was happening. She talked about Suhan's school, a book she was reading, a neighbor's garden that had become inexplicably competitive. Her English moved fluidly when she was telling a story. some textures of her accent rising and falling like geography. She set a bowl in front of me. Doenjang jjigae, fermented soybean paste stew, soft tofu, vegetables. Steam rising. The smell of it hit something deep and physical, the way certain foods do when you've been running on adrenaline and bad coffee. Eat before it gets cold, she said. Not a suggestion. I ate. It was extraordinary. The kind of food that feels like an argument for staying alive. She watched me take the first few bites with the unsentimental attention of someone who feeds people as a primary language. Your hair, she said. Here it was. Is it natural? She asked. Not rude. Genuinely curious. The directness of a generation that asks what it wants to know. It is, I said. She nodded, studying it. It suits you, she said. Definitive. Moving on. J1 had been exactly right. We ate. The morning moved. Suhan fell asleep again on a proper bed, the sleep of someone finally decompressing fully. I helped clear the table. She did not protest the help, which felt like a second form of acceptance. We washed dishes side by side in a silence that was comfortable in a way I hadn't expected. Then she said, without looking at me, "He hasn't brought anyone here in 9 years." I kept washing the bowl in my hands. I'm not. I started. I didn't say what you think I said, she interrupted gently. I said he hasn't brought anyone here. That means something about how he sees you. I'm not telling you what to do with that. I'm just a mother telling you a true thing. I set the bowl down. He barely knows me, I said. He knew in one evening, she said simply. J1 has always known people quickly. He just doesn't act on it. The knowing and the acting are very far apart in him. That is his father in him. His father, she paused. His father made him close a great deal of himself. To survive. I looked at her profile. She handed me a dish to dry. He'll be okay today? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. He has survived worse, she said. But I still stand at that window. She nodded toward the front of the house. Every time. I still stand there. I dried the dish. And understood, in that kitchen, something I hadn't fully understood before. That behind every man shaped by power and damage and a world that required his silence, there was usually a woman who had watched it happen and loved him anyway and carried the cost of that in private. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from the number J1 used. 4 words. Meeting with Shin confirmed. And then, 30 seconds later, a second message. Don't let Suhan see the news tonight. His mother read my face. She dried her hands on the dish towel. And she went to stand at the front window. The news didn't run his name. It ran the name of a building, a commercial property in downtown Los Angeles, a fire reported on the 14th floor, 2 men in custody, 1 hospitalized. The kind of segment that gets 40 seconds and a traffic update after it. I watched it in the kitchen with the volume low while Suhan ate breakfast and argued gently with his grandmother about whether American cereal was scientifically inferior to Korean porridge. His grandmother's eyes met mine over his head. I shook my head slightly. Nothing confirmed. Nothing to tell. She went back to the argument about cereal. I texted the number. Are you the one hospitalized? 12 minutes. Long enough that I counted them. Then, no. Then, don't text this number again until I contact you. Precaution. I put the phone face down on the counter. And I did what I had learned to do in the worst year of my life. I found the next small thing that needed doing and I did it. I washed the breakfast bowls. I helped Suhan with the math worksheet his grandmother produced from somewhere with the quiet authority of a woman who believed that disruption was not an excuse to fall behind. I sat beside him at the kitchen table and did 4th grade fractions. You're good at this, Suhan said, watching me work through a problem. I had a teacher who made it make sense, I said. Ms. Patterson. She used food as examples. Everything was pie. Everything should be pie, Suhan said seriously. That's the most correct thing you've said, I told him. He smiled. Small and real. The first full smile I'd seen from him since the restaurant. It hit me somewhere I'd been protecting. I looked back at the worksheet. Serena, he said. Yeah. When this is over. He stopped. Started again with the carefulness of a child, choosing words like someone who has learned they matter. Do people just go back to normal after something like this? I thought about how to answer that. Normal changes shape, I said. It doesn't go back to exactly what it was. But it comes back. A different version. Sometimes a better one. He considered that. Is that what happened to you? After you lost her? I kept my eyes on the paper. Yes, I said. It took a long time. But yes. He nodded. Processing. I think my dad is different, he said. Since you. I looked up. He asks about you, Suhan said. When you're not in the room. He doesn't think I notice, but I do. He shrugged with the elaborate casualness of a child being very deliberately casual. Just saying. I opened my mouth. The front door opened. J1 walked in. He was upright, which was the first thing I checked. Moving without favoring anything, which was the second. The cut on his forearm had a proper bandage now. His face was controlled as always, but there were shadows under his eyes and a set to his jaw that suggested the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fully fix. Suhan was out of his chair before I could register the movement. He didn't run, he walked fast, which for some reason was more affecting than running. Like he was trying to be old enough for the situation and couldn't quite manage it. J1 put one hand on the back of his son's head when Suhan reached him. Held him there for a moment. Eyes closed. Then he opened them and looked at me. I stayed at the table. It's done, he said. Shin. Neutralized. Not. He glanced at Suhan. He's not dead. He's simply no longer a factor. The information I brought to that meeting made his position untenable. He withdrew. And the people holding Jae-soo? Released when Shin pulled back. Jae-soo is home. Angry with me. Which means he's fine. Something knotted in my chest that I hadn't fully known was knotted. His mother appeared from the hallway. She looked at her son for a long moment. Then she said something in Korean, 3 words, quiet, and went back to the kitchen. But I heard, underneath the brevity, an entire architecture of relief. J1 sat down at the table. Not at the head of it. Not in the power position. Just at the table. Like a person who was tired and had found a place to be tired. Suhan sat beside him and went back to his fractions with the settled focus of a child whose world had just reordered itself correctly. I poured J1 coffee. He wrapped his hands around the cup exactly the way he had the first day I'd served him. Same gesture. Table 7. Months ago. You have a job to get back to, he said. I have a manager to fire first, I said. Then a job to get back to. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. The architecture of one. Carl, he said. Carl, I confirmed. I can. No, I said. I'll handle Carl. He looked at me. Of course you will, he said. And there was something in it. Not condescension, the opposite. Something close to admiration worn flat, the way he wore everything. We sat in the kitchen with the morning light coming through the window and Suhan doing fractions and his mother cooking something that smelled like the best possible version of the rest of the day. And I thought, this is the quietest I have felt in years. Which meant it was almost over. And I wasn't entirely sure how I felt about that. Suhan left on a Thursday. Switzerland, J1 had said. A school outside Geneva. Small, discreet, academically serious in the way that Suhan would eventually appreciate even if he didn't yet. A place chosen because it was genuinely good and not because it was far, which was a distinction J1 had made clearly. Not hiding. Going. There was a difference. Suhan understood it. I could tell by the way he packed, with the resignation of someone leaving, not the desperation of someone escaping. I was at the house in Pasadena when they came to collect him. I hadn't planned to be. J1 had called the night before and said, without making it a request exactly, without making it anything, really, just laying it out, that Suhan had asked if I would be there in the morning. So I was there. Suhan came downstairs with a backpack and a rolling suitcase and the gravity of a child trying very hard to be a good sport about something he didn't choose. He stood in front of me. I taught you how to say goodbye in Korean, he said. Last night. Remember? Jaljie, I said. That's the informal one, he said. You'd say that to me because I'm younger. Jaljie Suhan, I said. He looked at me with those eyes that had understood too much from the beginning. Then he hugged me. Both arms. Full. The kind of hug that says everything a 9-year-old doesn't have the vocabulary for yet. Gratitude and grief and the particular love that forms fast in crisis and is no less real for its speed. I held on. I'll remember her, he said into my shoulder. Your daughter. I'll remember that she was yours. I couldn't speak for a moment. Thank you, I managed. He pulled back, straightened his backpack with great seriousness. Tell my grandmother her porridge is better than cereal, he said. I don't want to give her the satisfaction directly. I absolutely will, I said. He picked up his suitcase and walked out to the car with his father's hand briefly on his shoulder, and his grandmother watching from the doorway with the practiced stillness of a woman who had been watching people she loved leave for a very long time. J1 came back 40 minutes later. I was still there. I didn't know if I should be. I'd been standing in the kitchen with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, trying to figure out what the correct exit looked like. He came in without his jacket. Stood at the counter. Neither of us spoke for a moment. His school has a good art program, he said finally. He draws. I don't know if you knew that. I didn't, I said. What does he draw? People, J1 said. Faces, mostly. He says you can tell more about a person from their face than anything else. I thought about that. He's right, I said. J1 looked at me. I owe you, he said. More than I can settle cleanly. You should know that I understand that. You don't owe me anything, I said. In my world. I'm not in your world, I said. I'm in mine. And in mine, you feed a hungry child because that's what you do. You don't invoice it. He was quiet. I'd like to, he said carefully, remain in contact. If you're open to that. I looked at him for a long moment. This man who had walked into my restaurant like a weather system and rearranged everything. Who had never fully softened, never performed a feeling he didn't have, never offered me comfort he couldn't back up. Who had told me hard truths when easier ones were available. Who had put his son in the same room as me and called it safety. One condition, I said. Name it. You don't manage me, I said. You don't make decisions about my safety without telling me. You don't move pieces around me like I'm on your board. If there's contact between us, it's between equals. Or there's nothing. He held my eyes. That's not how my world works, he said. I know, I said. I'm not asking about your world. I'm telling you about mine. A long silence. Okay, he said. Just that. No negotiation. No caveat. Okay, I said. He placed a card on the counter. Same as before. Just a number. But this one had something written on the back in small, precise Korean characters. What does that say? I asked. His name, J1 said. My mother's address. And mine. A pause. In case you need them. In case you want them. Either. I picked up the card. I walked out of that house in Pasadena on a Thursday morning with the sun doing its indifferent California best, and the smell of his mother's cooking still in my jacket, and a card in my pocket with 3 addresses on the back. I drove back to Los Angeles. I went to the restaurant. I had a conversation with Carl that was quiet and direct and final, and by noon I had his keys and a better understanding of what I was actually worth. I worked the lunch shift. I refilled coffee. I took orders. I smiled when I meant it. And at some point during the afternoon, somewhere between table 3 and the couple at the counter, I realized that nothing about my life looked different from the outside. Same restaurant. Same apron. Same view through the same window. But I had stood in the middle of something enormous and come out the other side without surrendering a single thing that mattered. Not my judgment. Not my dignity. Not the grief I carried quietly for a daughter whose name I still wasn't ready to say out loud. Not one thing. I thought about Suhan on a plane over the Atlantic, probably correcting someone's pronunciation of his name. I thought about Jaewon's mother at her window. I thought about a man who had learned, in the span of one impossible week, to ask instead of instruct, to earn instead of take. Not transformed, not saved, just shifted, slightly, in the way that only real things shift people. I thought about the card in my pocket. I didn't call that day, but I kept it. And some doors, I've learned, don't need to be walked through immediately to matter. They just need to stay open. That's enough. For now, that is more than enough. Thank you for watching Afro Korean Tales and Stories. As we close this story, I want to say something to the women watching. Some of you have lived through moments like this. Moments where you had to stand alone. Moments where you chose dignity over comfort. Moments where you refused to be bought, silenced, or pushed aside. That kind of strength doesn't always make noise, but it changes rooms. If you are a woman who believes respect is worth more than money, if you believe character still matters, if you believe dignity should never be negotiated, then this channel was made for you. I tell stories about women who stand firm, women who earn respect without begging for it, women who remind powerful people that integrity cannot be purchased. If that speaks to you, I invite you to subscribe and become part of this community. And if this story touched you, comment the word dignity below. I read your comments, and they help these stories reach more women like you. Until the next story, remember, not every powerful person leads with honor, but every strong woman carries it within her. I'll see you in the next one.